This session is about the teaching of novel. So after learning this topic, students will be able to establish characteristics of a novel, identify various types of novel. A novel is different from poetry in its style and form, but not in its purpose, as both give pleasure to the reader along with wisdom. When we compare between novel, short story, and poems, so all of these three are different from each other due to its style and forms, but keeping in view its purpose, the purpose of all three are the same and all three are being used for pleasuring the reader along with wisdom. So many book defines a novel as a work of fiction, almost always written in prose at least 150 to 200 pages long. So a novel can be defined as long story in prose meant for entertainment and presenting a realistic picture of life. So novel is an invented prose narrative of considerable length and a certain complexity that deals imaginatively with human experience, usually through a connected sequence of events involving a group of persons in a specific setting. And where that word of novel comes from, so the novel in the present English word that is actually derived from the Latin word novella for new, news, or short story of something new. Novel actually gives you something new, something news in it, and having some type of short stories of something new. So the novel is a picture of real life and manners and of the time in which it is written. So the romance in lofty and elevated language describes what never happened nor is likely to happen. That's Clara Reeve, The Progress of Romance 1785. So when we talk about novel, so novel is having some type of very similitude. So very similitude is a semblance of truth, recognizable settings and characters in real time. What Hazlitt calls the close imitation of men and manners, the very texture of society as it really exists. So the novel emerged when authors fused adventure and romance with verisimilitude and heroes that were not supermen but ordinary people, often insignificant nobodies. So definition of novel: a novel portrays characters and presents a sequential organization of actions and scenes. Most novels involve many characters and tell a complex story by placing the characters in a number of different situations and is carries on the actions. A novel has a scene of time and action, that is the place and time where different things happen to different characters. It may be a limited region or vast universe. So novelists produce novels that have the tensions of a drama, the type of commentary found in an essay, and the imagery and rhythm of a poem. Over the centuries, writers have continually experimented with the novel forms and it has constantly evolved in new directions. So, in a novel, the treatment of life is realistic. Thus, it is realism that distinguishes from earlier forms. So, novel does not provide escape from problems of life, rather it tries to develop understanding of those problems. So, a novel is fictional piece of prose usually written in a narrative style that we have discussed earlier also. That novel is a fictional piece, like story is also a fictional piece of prose, and the difference between these two is that novel is a lengthy written prose, whereas short story is written in a shortest possible way. So it deals with actions and events which constitute its plots. Like a short story, a novel tells a story, but unlike the short story, the novelist writer has the freedom to develop plot, characters, and themes slowly and in great detail. The novelist can also sound the main plot with subplots. So a novel reflects author's view of life. It thus gives us author's criticism of life and his philosophy of life also. So novel can open up to new world It can take you to the places you have never been. When we actually look into the characteristics of a novel, it can place you that you have never been. It has takes you to the times long ago. It has take you to times in future. It can take you into the hearts and minds of others also. So a novel is a fictional text work. It is usually divided into chapters, and novel is a relatively long and often complex plot. So story traditionally developed through the thoughts and actions of its characters is called as novel. Rise of novel, how novel emerged. So prior to the use of the term novel, the term romance describes any longer narrative, particularly involving adventure and love. In the 17th century, the authors of novels set their genre against false romances by appealing to historical truth that is facts or poetic truth that is probability. So the English novel took off in the 18th century with the growth of a reading upper and middle class and became the first genre to reach a mass market as well as the first developed equally by and for women writers and readers. In 13th and 14th century, Middle English romances. In 17th century, Precursors, for example, Cervantes, Don Quixote, and French romances. In 18th century, Starrick, Allegory, Swift, Gulliver's Travels, so diaries, personal journals, periodicals, newspapers, literary journals, those all were written in a noveltic form like biographies, political criminal. The novel is a picture of real life and manners and of the time in which it is written. And last slide is, which is actually one of the best slide in whole presentation. So thank you all.